Hello, Michael Tracy here, TYT. Good evening, all. Um, I am in El Dorado Hills, California. I attended a town hall meeting earlier today, hosted by Tom McClintock, who is one of the very few Republicans these days who seems to be holding town halls anymore. So I have to give him some plaudits for even doing it in the first place. He very obviously knew that the town hall was going to be dominated by hostile constituents. His previous town hall a few weeks ago ended with him being escorted out by local police. So he couldn't have come into this thinking that it was going to be an especially receptive crowd, but he did it nevertheless, which I think is laudable. And he was uniquely accessible, I thought. He took questions for over 2 hours, and then he spent some time afterwards talking to constituents one-on-one, talking to the press. So just on that level, I would have to give him some degree of credit for at least conducting himself in a reasonable manner, engaging with constituents and so forth. My takeaway from this event, other than just being, impressed on the merits for the accessibility of what McClintock exhibited, is that Russia is and remains and will continue to be the number one issue that is events. And I would love to no longer have to talk about Russia. That would be preferable, in my estimation. I'd rather not have to spend basically every day at this point rebutting overwrought claims about supposed collusion between Russia and Trump, having to counteract the hysteria that I think has gripped much of the Democratic base. But it's on display everywhere everywhere you turn, seemingly. So people on Twitter and elsewhere will occasionally chastise me for being too fixated on this stuff, for being too unkind to Democrats for becoming enraptured by Russia mania. But then I go to a town hall for a Republican congressman, for which liberal groups have organized protests and organized a plan of action to signal their discontent with the current order of things, which is fine by me. And then I show up, and the number one issue that they're talking about is Russia, and yet it's somehow me who is overemphasizing the stuff. So, for example, you walk into the town hall this morning, and people are outside holding signs. Some people have signs about Obamacare, which is fine, and opposing any modifications to the current healthcare system, or wanting to argue against the repeal of the ACA. But then you also have people holding signs saying Trump, Putin with the hammer and sickle, kind of transposed. You have just one sign after another, just blaring that Trump is in cahoots with Putin and demanding investigation and even impeachment on that ground. So it's impossible to miss at this point. It's gripping the most activated core of the party. It's what the most active Democratic constituents now are demanding that their representatives focus on. So it's impossible to ignore. I mean, it needs to be scrutinized. This is a pretty incredible development in American politics that something like this would become such a preeminent concern among the ostensibly liberal party. So the footage from this event will be coming out fairly soon. It includes my talking to McClintock, talking to the people who are brandishing the Russia signs. And to me, it's just depressing because it was indicative of this paranoid streak that is ordinarily associated with the right. So the right obviously has a conspiratorial strain. They have a tendency to latch on to overly simplified explanations of why things aren't going well. Even theories about the New World Order or the Illuminati or things like that, those tend to be espoused more by people of a right-wing sensibility than a left-wing sensibility, although there are some people on the left who would share in that sentiment. But the Russia issue now is inflected with such a paranoid kind of way of looking at the world that it just needs to be pointed out and hopefully curtailed. Otherwise, it's going to become much more dominant. And the issue is that Democratic leaders and pundits and politicians and other people of prominence and of influence keep feeding this notion that there's this kind of sinister Russian collusion happening, and that the election was fraudulent because of this supposed collusion. So you had one really telling instance, and this guy I spoke to, he seemed like a reasonable, nice enough guy. He had founded on his own accord the Indivisible chapter for Roseville, California. He might even be watching this video. If so, hello. I don't have any problem with him on a personal level, but he was walking, so he was kind of leading the some of the chants and some of the just the pressure that a lot of people in the attendance were applying on Congressman McClintock to answer questions more directly or to not skirt. It's fine. I mean, some of the answers were in fact evasive, but you had this person had a sign ready to go that said, Trump, Russia equals treason. And he was going around holding the sign up and kind of egging the crowd on to cheer that notion that Trump has committed treason by dint of his. So if this is a guy leading the Indivisible chapter, which is supposed to be the main resistance locus, and one of his top issues now is accusing the president of treason for collusion with Russia. I mean, that warrants concern, I think. The paranoid streak was also made pretty evident when the very first question, so the most highly publicized question, the question when people were most tuned in to the town hall, was on Russia. So a woman stands up and basically demands that McClintock pay more attention to Russia investigation. So it wasn't an ancillary concern. It was foremost on the minds of so many people that were there. And you had people, running around screaming treason, screaming Nazi. It's just getting so overwrought. This is not a rational approach. There needs to be a rational opposition to Trump, a discerning opposition. This is the point that I've been harping on for so long now, it seems. And when the opposition becomes mired in this hysteria and their delusions and paranoia, I think ultimately that's going to strengthen Trump. So that's the ultimate issue here. It's not about casting these people as necessarily inherently bad. People have limited information capacity, limited capacity to gather information. So if people who they look to as authorities are presenting this Russia issue as of huge import, then of course they're going to take that seriously, and it's going to become high on their personal agendas. But then, so after the first question was asked, and it had to do with Russia, soon after, somebody who appeared to be a Trump supporter, McClintock's district outside Sacramento is mostly Republican. I mean, it's a Republican district. It has consistently elected this guy. So you would expect some share of the questioners to be conservatives, Republicans, Trump supporters, something along those lines. And the Trump supporter, I mean, I think he was a Trump supporter because he seemed to be wearing a red "Make America Great Again" hat. I couldn't quite tell just because of the distance, but he basically said something to the effect of, I'm not in a position where I can be worried about Russia because the Oroville Dam, which is in the area, has caused flooding, which is maybe for my physical safety and that the physical safety of my family. So maybe we'll get to Russia once we could just address basic infrastructure problems. That was basically his point. And you had people running around speculating that this was a planted question, that it was had somehow coordinated with this person. And I saw no evidence of that. I mean, 90% of the people asking questions were hostile to McClintock. So to me, maybe not 90%, 80, something like that. But a majority of questioners were hostile to McClintock. So the idea that this was like in a Republican district, it must have been a plant for somebody to get up and kind of question the prevailing Russia narrative and suggest that maybe other priorities should be emphasized. Yeah, the idea that had to be like somehow like a question that was just indicative of the paranoid streak. So that worries me. Yeah, that's about it. Video will be coming out soon, so stay tuned for that. Otherwise, have a wonderful evening.